everybody from China is Eastern method. It's just that parts of the globe throw clockwise and parts of the globe throw counterclockwise, okay? And it's just regional. And to some degree, it's who's your teacher. So if your teacher works in an Eastern method, probably you're going to work in the Eastern method too. And that's why it's like different regions, because people started potteries and then other people followed, and then that region got known and they did it that way. And they're still doing it that way literally 1,000 years later, okay? So it's cool, like I love that. But I can only help you because I know the Western method, so you need to have the wheel going counterclockwise, okay? Now, that means the switch is out there instead of in here. Now, I'm going to make it go the other way. So I'm going to click it, and I'm going to shut the wheel off, and then I'm going to turn it on. So see, now it's clockwise, okay? To change the direction, so if you're getting going, all of a sudden you're like, wow, the wheel's not right. Shut the wheel off like that, so make the pedal stop, then shut the wheel off, then take this switch, and if it's straight, it means it's in neutral, so it's not going to go either way, it's just in neutral. So then push it out, away from you, and that's going to be the correct direction, okay? And then turn your wheel back on and go. Now, if you had a kick wheel, you just kick, okay? And again, like, that's a really great tool. Like, I'll do a throwing or trimming demo on that. Like, when there's no power, you can still throw. You don't need the electricity, and people haven't for a long time. Now, the reality is, some people have wheels where they have a stick, and they go like this. That's the power, and then they throw, and then they go like that, and then they throw, and then they go like that. And that's how you do it. And in other places, somebody is kicking the wheel for them. Okay? And, there's this one that's like a really heavy, like wheel into like a little bit of a hole that's in a stone. And the whole weight, you get it going, and then it goes for a while, and then it's a big deal. It's hard, physically, okay? Now, as some of you know, and I'm pointing to Christine because she knows, this is a physical thing, like what you're doing is physical. So please pay attention to what your body's telling you. You may only be able to stand, or you may only be able to tolerate an hour of bending over like this before your lower back starts bugging you, or your shoulders start bugging you, or your wrists start bugging you. Stop, do something else, then come back to it. To work for 6 hours straight on a wheel is physically demanding. Okay? So like, don't expect to be on here 6 hours straight. It's not going to happen. And that's okay. You got to trim, you got to glaze. You might be designing things, so like, give yourself some breaks. Also, before I do any more, I got to say this because I don't want you to be discouraged. This is hard. I don't mean like you can't do it. I just mean you're going to have to focus, and it's going to be a challenge. Do not beat yourself up if you can't do it after a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, okay? If you can, by the end of the semester, at will, center and throw a pot. Even if you get none of the assignments done, you've passed the class because it's learning that skill. Sean, if you miss a bunch of time, you're not going to be able to do it. So just know that.
I had surgery, that's why.
No, I know. But I'm just saying, even if you will pass, because the skill that I'm trying to get you to know is that. And if you can do it at will by the end, that's all you need to pass. Now, it's not an A, it's a C. But so take the pressure off yourself and enjoy the process. Give yourself a break because it's difficult, okay? I make it look easy. Occasionally you're going to see Damien throwing. He makes it look easy. Christina makes it look easy, okay? But it's practice. And the more you practice something, it's like, it looks really easy, right? Because you practice it a lot. So it's effortless. but it's not, okay? And you're gonna watch YouTube and you're gonna go, oh, that's easy. No, it's not, but they've practiced, okay? I love that about YouTube, is I get to see different ways people do it, and there are a million different ways to do it. So, okay, let's throw this. So, because I'm not gonna open it like a pot, I'm only interested in coning, which is the first part of throwing, and centering. Those are the only two things to start with. So I put a little water on there, and I put a little water on my hand. Notice I didn't bathe it. I just put a little water on the clay, a little water on my hands, and then I kind of go like this and push down. I'm pushing down to just make sure the clay is seated onto the wheel. Okay? And if you're not sure, you can always take your sponge and get it wet and kind of push a little more. Okay? But notice, I'm controlling the amount of water I'm putting on it. I'm not just bathing it and blowing it all out, because it just immediately flies off. So just put a little, do a little one thing, then put a little, do one thing, you know. Now, I know it's stuck on, so now I want to just push in, the clay goes up. Okay, so I'm going to push in, and really I'm going like this, so I'm using the heel of my hand, so I'm going like this, and the clay is going to go up, so I push in, and the clay goes up. Okay? Then, a little more water. Left hand, this is really critical. Your left hand does most of the work in throwing. Whether you're right or left-handed, if you're doing Western or Occidental method, this is the work hand. So we put the left hand like this, we curl it around the clay. We don't put our hand like this. We put it to the side with our thumb about halfway over, and then our right hand interlocks with our left. Okay? So the right hand's like stabilizing the left, but the clay is moving into the left. It's the work hand. If you try to do the same thing with your right, your hand wants to do this. Okay? Not good. So if we use this, I mean, I can just using my left hand make it happen. Okay? But it's gonna be a little more difficult for you. Okay? I can actually make a pot with my left hand only.
Is that the fastest speed?
No.
No.
But this is a pretty good speed. So that's a great question. So speed's really important. One of the things that's great about a kick wheel, it forces you to pay attention to speed at all times, because it basically is always slowing down. So you got to get it to where you want it. With the power wheel, people turn it on and then they're not paying attention to speed. And it's important to pay attention to speed. My suggestion to you is find a speed that seems like it's right and take your foot off the pedal, so that you're not adjusting the speed until you consciously adjust. Because what happens with throwers is this. So if you've got your wheel on here and you're beginning, and you're doing this, and like right now I've got some speed, okay? So I'm pushing up and down, and I do that 3 times. Cone up, push down. 3 times, that's all. That's all you need to do. In this case, because I'm making a pad to stick the board on with, I'm now going to take my fist and just go like this. This is my right hand. It's one of the few times I use my right hand. And I push my fist down, stabilizing it with the left. Okay? Then I take my rib, my ever trusty wood one, and I'm just taking the surface and I flatten it. Okay? And then I'm going to take the corner of it Okay? Now, you do not have to put the tread in, but it is helpful for a beginner. It really is, Some people, like a lot of my friends who do it like all day long every day, they just make it smooth. But it helps the thing suction on. So then you take your board and you take your sponge and you drizzle a little water on the clay And some people then wring their sponge out and wipe the board so it's moist but not wet, like it's not shiny wet. And then visually kind of line it up so it's reasonably centered. The reality is, if it's not centered, it's not going to cause any issues, except visually, it's going to mentally play with you. Because you have to block it out then because it's going like this. So you have to kind of mentally go, no, I'm centering. And you can do it. Like I know how to just block it out. Like, because I practice, okay? So then I take my hand and I get it sort of dry. One hit. You can go like that to make sure, but it's one hit in the center, that's it. Now, if it's got this water on there, then take one of your ribs that is dry and just sort of scrape it so that it, again, it's not wet, slippery, okay? And then we take a piece of clay. I'm just taking the corners off, just like I did before. And again, you can make it rounder, pat it into a ball. Great. I'm not going to, for interest of speed. Okay? Now, if you start with a ball, you will find it easy. Okay? You will, because it's more in keeping with what you're going to do. Okay? So, put a little water on there, a little water on my hand. Again, I'm just pushing down, just like I did for the pad. Okay, I'm just pushing down to make sure that it's seated on the board. So it's left hand, right hand. Left hand always first. It's the work hand. Right hand's an assistant. It's a stabilizer, but it's not the work hand. Okay?
Is starting with a ball easier than starting with a cone?
Starting with a ball easier than what?
Starting with a cone.
No, they're about equal. But the cone generally has a broader base, which makes it stick down a little better. If there is an advantage, that's the advantage. There's more surface area to stick it to. Okay, so we make sure, like some people you'll see on YouTube, there's certain people who, as soon as they do what I've just done, they take their sponge and they go to the edge and they make sure that it's sealed. Not everybody does that, but like you'll see that that's a common theme within the YouTube world. That there's a lot of people who go, make sure that happens. And it's a good idea, but it's not, you don't have to do it. Okay? Now, a little water again. You're always just putting a few drops of water on, basically with each step. And, like I said, if this speed seems comfortable to you, because you're not going to really know initially, take your foot off. The main reason is, if you're throwing and it's working out, you tend to be more focused because it's working out. You tend to be looking at the clay going, whoa, and you're into it. You're leaning into it. You're accelerating the pedal. And what happens is you're unaware that the wheel is gradually getting faster. With a kick wheel, it forces you to pay attention to speed. But this doesn't. So then what happens is, by the time you realize, because you're a beginner, that you are going too fast, it's too late. And your pot just, boom, it's gone, okay? So I cone it, and I'm gonna cone it a little taller, but just like when I set the pad, I'm just coning up, pushing down. Repeat 3 times. Cone up, push down. Okay, one more time. Now, if you cone it up and down 3 times, and I mean cone it up and down, not just sort of barely move, okay? You have done equivalently what you do when you etch. The clay particles or platelets are lining up in a spiral alignment, but they're also stacking like dishes. They're not randomly like this. They are lining up. And, believe me, there's graduate students all over America who are taking samples of pots after they're made, slicing them, putting on under electron microscopes and looking at particle arrangement. This is what happens in grad school for some people. They get into that level. They dive that deep. I don't, but I appreciate that somebody is, because it verifies what we thought. Okay? Now, Once you've coned it up and down 3 times, don't keep coning it up and down because you'll fatigue your clay. Now your only mission is it centered or not? So you want to make it centered. Now, this is not centered. Okay, if your clay is doing a little hula, it is uncentered. Okay, so we put a little water on there, we put our hands on there on each side, and we become still. Like you're just still. That's all you are. Okay? And it's becoming centered. Okay? If you over push it, it's going to go off again. So you want to do it in a gradual way. And in this case, I'm really pushing with my left hand. The right's just stabilizing the left, but you know, it's the left hand that's doing the work. Now, once it's centered, you know, you're done. You don't have to play anymore with it because again, the piece of clay is constantly, you're changing the water ratio. If you do it too much, the clay will become fatigued and basically it will open really easy and then collapse. You don't want it to be like that. You want to be able to have some firm body and be able to do something like it, okay? So now we're going to open it. Oh, sorry. No, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a decision right now. What are we making? Are we making a bowl, a cylinder, a bottle? What are we making? Because this right here before we open is what makes that decision for us if we don't, okay? So if you're trying to make, say, a cylinder, right now it's just slightly wider than it is tall, but just slightly. That will make a decent cylinder. If I wanted to make a slightly narrower, taller cylinder, I would just do this. I would just pull it in slightly, so now it's almost the same this way and this way. That will give you a nice, even, slightly taller cylinder than the other shape, okay? If I'm gonna make a shallow bowl that's wide, I actually wanna go lower and start more with a shape like this. And if I was making a plate, I would go even wider and lower, okay? So I'm gonna run through a few shapes. They're all about the same size piece of clay, so it's good because you're gonna see, like, okay, this size piece of clay makes this, or this, or this, okay? And I would strongly recommend that you weigh your clay and get used to what you're comfortable with. Find out, what are you comfortable with? 2 pounds, 1.75 pounds, 2.25 pounds, somewhere in that neighborhood, find out. And then when you want to go bigger, double whatever you're comfortable with, okay? So if you're comfortable with 2 pounds, go to 4. If you struggle at 4, go back halfway. So go to 3, and you might be surprised, like, wow, I can do 3 pretty good, but I'm still dying at 4. As soon as you get totally comfortable with 3, then go to 6. Again, if you can't do 6, come back down halfway. You will find you can go bigger more evenly if you jump out and struggle just a little and come halfway back to what you're comfortable with. You will be shocked at, like, oh, I can do this, okay? Okay, so we're gonna go a little taller. I wanna make a slightly taller cylinder. As a beginner, this is your #1 goal, and I mean this. If you can do this, you can pass the class. If you can do it, it will. But everything's a cylinder, everything. A plate, a bowl, a cup, everything's a cylinder. So focus on making a cylinder, because if you can do it, it opens all the doors, not just some, okay? Okay, so we have this shape. Note that there's this little, like, you know, maybe undercut, like right there. So your clay isn't like that. It's just tucked in right there, okay? We take our thumbs. Some people go like this, and they put both hands on and they make a little depression. Some people start like this. I like to start with my thumbs, okay? But I just make a little depression and I put some water in there. Then I take my left hand. The left hand's the one that's gonna do the main push in and is gonna be aided by the right. So then I put my left hand at that angle, about a 45, and I push down. And I just treat my left hand like it was a piece of wood. I'm just pushing on it, okay? Now, my opening goes like that. I'm not diving in. If you dive in, your hand wants to twist, and then you get an off-center hold. Just push and keep your hand at a 45, and it will just open for you. And then the beauty is that shape, that V shape, is stabilizing your hand while you continue to push. So it holds it centered as you do it, okay? Now, when you get kind of where you think the bottom is, because for a beginner, you're not gonna really know how far down do I go, okay? Get your needle tool out, poke a hole, put your finger to where the clay starts. That's too much bottom, but that tells me I got a ways to go still. What I want is probably right about here, like 3/8 of an inch, because I'm going to trim just slightly on the bottom, okay? So I go a little more, and then I'm going to curl with my left hand, and again, my right's stabilizing my left, but I'm just curling like this, okay? And that creates the initial floor, okay? Now, I take my foot and I'm slowing the wheel down and I'm pushing back down to smooth the floor. So I'm using my fingertips to just even the floor up slightly, okay? And then I'm gonna take my rib, this one, and I'm gonna put the corner, this edge out and the round edge in, okay? And I'm gonna go like this, kind of at an angle, not really straight, like more like this. And I'm gonna even the floor so it's super smooth. I'm just pressing down really slightly. Now this does two things. It makes for a really nice smooth bottom, but more importantly, I am compressing the clay across the floor, which means way less possibility of S-cracks later, okay? Now, because I use this tool that makes a square edge, it's going to allow me to get under and make like an undercut right here. And you can do that one of two ways. You can either squeeze so that I get an undercut, or you can go like this and just push in slightly, okay? So now there's this undercut, so it's like a donut or tire of clay with a floor, okay? Does that make sense? Okay, so then a little more water, the left hand goes inside, the right hand goes outside. Always, always. Don't like, oh no, I'm gonna do it this way. You can't. Well, you can and you're gonna struggle. You have to work with the movement. So the left hand is in here, the right hand is out here, the clay exits your hand. If you go over here, it's forcing and you're working against that energy instead of with that energy. I know it seems like, well, it's just one side and the other, but you are. And if you were working on the other side, we would have the wheel going the other direction and you'd be eastern. Okay, but like I said, I'm Occidental, so I got to do it this way. Okay, now, lifting the clay is just having your left hand inside, your right hand outside, and they're not equal. They're offset. The outside hand, because it's all the way to the bat or the wheel or whatever, and the inside has a floor, the inside hand is higher than the outside hand, always. But the beauty of that is it allows you to lift, and whether you're using your knuckles or your fingertips or a combination of both, it's up to you. Find what's comfortable and strong. So some people, when they fold their finger over and use their knuckle, they're really strong, whereas when they use their fingertips, it's like they don't have the strength to lock up their joints, and it like their finger flops around, but as soon as they fold, they're rigid and they're strong and they feel good. Whatever feels good, just this is where you gotta block people out. Like you're gonna see Christina over there, Damien over there, whatever, and they're gonna be just whipping pots at. And you're gonna be going, oh, I wanna do that. Well, it's working for them, but it might not yet work for you. So go with what you're strong with, what you feel confident with, okay? So if it's knuckles, do your knuckles. I tend to throw one of each. I tend to use my left hand, unless I'm going big, like a big pot, like half a bag of clay or something. I use my left hand open, fingertip, And then for this size, I would use fingertips on both, but often I'll use my knuckle on the outside. Now, the other thing that people do, which I would advise you to not do, is don't put the sponge between your hand and the clay, because you're not feeling what's going on with the clay. If you're gonna use a sponge so you have more water, dip your sponge, wring it out some, and hide it behind here, so that as you're throwing, water can leak out. You can just squeeze and you can get more water. But make sure it's clay to hand, not clay to sponge. Okay? So like I'm working like this. This is back here adding lubrication, but it's not cushioning or buffering so I can't feel. Okay? Okay, so let's do this. So I'll get rid of it. I do it when it's big, but I don't need to do it when it's little. So I just pinch. And I go up at whatever the wheel speed is. I'm essentially making a revolution in any one setting. So like it's there, and then I'm going slow enough that the clay makes a full revolution before I'm really moving up. Okay? A little water, same thing. I'm going to reach in with my left. I'm going to squeeze out a little. Squeeze in with the right. It's going to make a groove that is offset. They're not equal. And then I'm going to pull up again. Okay? And I am not going as fast as what I centered with. I'm going slower than what I centered. Okay? And then at the top, you always want to leave a little extra clay. And you're going to get goop that grabs on, so that you just get rid of that. And then we do it again. Now, generally, 3 or 4 pulls is all the clay can do if you're doing it correctly. If you're not getting enough lift, you might have to do 5 or 6. But if you're getting enough lift, you probably will only need to do 3 or 4 pulls. I ease the pressure off at the top, so I leave a little extra clay at the top. And I go like that. Now, I take my chamois or my paper towel, my poor man chamois, and I just go like that. This finishes the rim and compresses the rim. And you can even shape the rim if you want. Okay? And then I take my cutoff stick. Now, before I do any outside business, I take my sponge and I reach in and I mop up whatever remaining water is inside. Okay? You never leave water on the inside of your pot. Because if you do, it's going to crack. Or it's going to collapse, one of the two. Like, some people leave so much water that literally the wall saturates and then the whole pot just kind of collapses on itself. If you only leave a little, it sucks through the bottom, decompresses the bottom, and it cracks. Okay? And it doesn't always crack like right when you do it, but when it's fired, there's a big crack. Okay? So now, you take your tool, and if you just go like this, in from the side at the angle the tool makes, it makes a pretty nice little 45, okay? And I'm gonna cut away that little extra clay right there at the base first, and then put that little 45 on. Okay, now, wheel, like throw marks from your finger, that's an aesthetic choice. That's not a good or bad thing. It's something you choose because you like it or you don't like it. Okay? If you want it smooth, you can take your rib and you're going to push the clay from inside with your left hand, and you're going to bring the clay to the rib. Don't bring the rib to the clay. You bring the clay to the rib. Okay? And so I'm going to put this next to, just off the pot, and then bring the clay to it. Okay? So I turn it on, and I put the rib really near. I'm going to try to get it so everybody can see. So I'm putting it near, but it's not next. And then I'm pushing from the inside out to it. And then I just follow it up, and I smooth out those throw marks. And if it's really tall, then I just follow that. Okay? Now, I really want you to understand throw marks are part of the process, and if you like the look of them, and some people do aesthetically, leave them. Like, I have no issue with throw marks. It's not a skill thing. Some of my favorite potters just let all that stuff hang out, and they do it elegantly and beautifully, and I love the energy that I feel when I see the throw mark. And I purposely will sometimes go back, like I'll throw a smooth thing and really smooth it, and then go back and put a single corkscrew of a throw mark in, because I want that look, okay? So, in this case, I take my cutoff stick, because now it's smooth, and I bevel the bottom slightly, and then I look at the rim. Now, if you don't want the rim flared, like right now it's flared, okay? So if you want it straight, you just get a little water on your hands and you straighten it up. So I'm choking the rim in a little. That's called collaring or choking. Okay? And I'll, smooth out. Yeah?
What about the inside? If you want the inside smooth,
Well, then you could rib up the inside as well. You put the rib up with your left hand and you smooth with the right. Or you can even work with two ribs. That, as a beginner, working with two ribs can be tricky. Okay? But you can do that. Like people do that all the time.
sponge?
Yeah, I was just thinking the sponge.
Because the rim can be too wide.
No, I'll show you in a minute. I'll do another thing with something on the inside. I'm going to do a bowl, and I'm going to smooth the inside of the bowl. But it's more open. As a beginner, you need to first kind of ease into that idea. You can do it, but learn how to make the cylinder first and then bring in those other variables. Okay? So, this is what we're going for. And what I want you to understand is this is a check-in. So just like when I comb the clay up and down and then flatten it out for the pad, this is a check-in. And actually, before we do that, so now the cool thing about being on a pad when you're using a board, not a bat, and a lot of pros who throw the numbers, like the factory I worked at, all the small pots were made on boards because they were less expensive than bats, and you could go faster. So if you throw a pad, you can use it all day long, and you can throw 400 things in a day, and you can have a stack of boards, and then you just boom, boom, and you just slam them on there, slam the clay on, throw, and then you just go to the corner and lift. And now, and this does not get distorted, okay? And then boom, you literally slam it down, and a piece of clay, and my friend, the factory that I decorated at, my roommate would throw 400 a day, one every 50 seconds from beginning to end. Perfect. One exactly like the other. He would do, say, 100 and then get his next 100 pieces of clay ready, and then do a run of 100, have lunch, do a run of 100, get his next, that's the rhythm. But 400, one every 50 seconds. And we were timing. We used to joke because certain guys would be throwing the same size pot, and they would sync up, so you'd hear two people slapping the bat and clay down, pa pa, pa pa, and then pa pa. One every 50 seconds. Crazy. Okay, so now, this is the check-in. I just take, and I cut the wire, so I'm keeping the wire as flat as I can. So if you pull this way, it's going to cut up into your pot. So I'm trying to pull it, so my fingers are actually holding it, and I'm pulling from the side, and the finger is helping keep the wire really flat to the board, so it just slices across the bottom. You cannot slice it so no clay is on the board. It's physically almost impossible. There's an artist named Phil Cornelius who's a great potter, but his real body of work that he became famous for was developed from taking the residual thin slab left on the board or bat And once he figured that out, he would slam clay onto big pieces of plaster and then wire the slab off, pick it up, and then peel this thin, paper thin slab off. That's how he did his work. He didn't roll it out. He slammed it down and wired it off. Okay? So anyway, I just cut it. Now, check in, go halfway, and just pull your wire through. What we're looking for is a floor and wall that's essentially even, maybe a slight taper, like there's a slight taper there, but a little extra clay in the rim. And the bottom is thick enough that I can trim a little shallow foot if I want. Okay? That's like I said, if you can do that at will by the end, you pass the class. Even if you can't get anything made and fired and glazed, because this is the skill. And believe me, if you can do this by the end of the semester, then your next semester, it's like the doors are wide open. You're going to be able to do anything you want. So it's really important to focus on cylinders. Even though bowls are what will come more naturally, because bowls are more ergonomically what you want to make. Like your body and centrifugal force and gravity are all like behind you saying bowl, 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 because it's easier. Okay? You're literally, all the forces in nature, including your body, are going bowl. Okay? So think about that. Okay? But that's what you want. And this is all usable. Like, it's okay on your first piece of clay to just warm up that way every day. And, people think, oh, nobody really does that. One of the best potters I've ever seen in my life was a guy from Australia. And his check-in was he took a full bag of clay every day, because he would throw 2, 3, 4 bag pots. So a 4 bag pot is a 200-pound pot. That's like throwing up here and having a pot like this, and having an assistant kick it because you can, or turning it on and adjusting because you can't get at the pedals. That's how big you're making when you're going 200 pounds. His check-in was take a whole bag of clay, throw it down, center it, pull a cylinder as thin as he could, cut it in half, and look at it. And he would go, okay, wow, I'm in. I'm dialed today. And the next day, I gotta work a little, I gotta focus a little more, I'm not really there. And the thing is, I watched him do that as a demo. Like, he was about to do like a 3-bag pot, and he had his assistant there, and he sat down and threw a huge pot to his like armpit. Amazing, and quick, and then cut it in half. And I was like, whoa. And he goes, I do this every day. That's my check-in. And our culture is not into that thinking. We're about immediacy as a culture. We want it now. We don't want to pay our dues, all that stuff. We want it to happen and everything click. It's not, that's not how this works. Okay, this is about like paying the dues, practice. It's just about practice. But if you do check-ins, you will find you become more aware, and then you have to check in less because you're more aware. Okay? But I'll tell you, the more you do check in all the time, it's like you're going to be more in sync all the time. So, okay, let's do a bat. So this can be reused. So like I can literally go like this to stick another one on. Like, okay, until I came here as a teacher in 97. No studio that I worked in had the pin bats. I owned some pins for my wheel, and I had a few bats that had the pin set up. But for the most part, this is what I had stacks of, and it's great. So, you just go like this to refresh your pad. You sort of line it up, and you're good. Now you work again. And in this case, if I was going to add another piece of clay, I would clean that off and stick it right back on. Okay? Now, let's do that. And so one of the advantages that this has that I mentioned before is that it's recentered. So like this puts it back on if you're taking your pot off and on to do things and you're letting it firm up, like a friend of mine, that big pot in the window of my office. My friend who made that, what he would do is, he made that at Cal State Fullerton in the early 80s. He would just come in on Saturday morning when no one would be there. And he would use 5 wheels, and because there were a bunch of wheels. So he would throw 5 wheels in a row. He would make a big cylinder,